Hey, how are you guys doing? It's been a minute. My name's Peter Howard at PA Howdy on Twitter and Threads are everywhere else you need that. We missed the last couple of weeks because one time we were both too tired and the second time I was asleep. So similar reasons. I don't know I'd be doing it today if we didn't miss the last 2 weeks, to be honest with you. I'm in need of food and probably inebriation. But the season is almost here, and we do try and make it most. We've only missed 3 Wednesdays, 9:30 till we run out of questions or get really, really tired, or the questions get stupid. Not right. We like to talk about fantasy football. Any questions, comments, thoughts, trade questions, or trades that you would like us to go over, please drop in whatever chat box, whatever streaming platform you're happily listening to us on. I think we go to Twitter and Twitch. No, just YouTube and Twitch at this point because Twitter charges money and we're not into that. Yeah, nice to see you. Sorry for the absence, but we are back once again, ready to talk Dynasty and fantasy football in general. So let's go check out Zach and see how he's been doing just as soon as I remember where all the buttons are. How you doing, Zach?
Not bad. I missed that intro. That Bob really killed it with that. He did. Everything. But I'm gonna hijack the open, Peter. It's been a minute. It's been a minute, but it's also Bob Gilchrist's birthday today. I want to wish him a happy birthday, but more to the point, for the people that are watching, listening to us now, there is a special over at shopfantasycares.com, which is where you can get your Scott Fishbowl merch, the t-shirts and everything, like the t-shirt that I'm wearing, like the t-shirt that Peter's wearing. You can get buy one, get one half off for Bob's birthday, but you've only got about 2 hours and 19 minutes left to do that with the code HB Bob. So happy birthday, Bob. You can buy one, get one completely off. So that's like getting half off your shirts. So if you're watching, if you're a Scott Fishbowl fan, if you're just a fan of great t-shirts because they're awesome, and also a fan of charity, go head over shopfantasycares.com. HB Bob will get you a buy one, get one for the merchandise over there. So, all right, now do what you got to do. Roll back into a show and actually do things. But
you could also sign up for fantasy. What is it called? Trade calculator, Dynasty Trade Calculator, DTC, Dynasty Trade Calculator, which costs less than a decent cup of coffee. And that's where Bob. Is that where Bob does his content? Does he do content anymore? He works for them and likes it when people sign up for that.
So. Yeah, he does content over there. He does a whole bunch of stuff for Fantasy Cares. So that's the.
We may as well push that out there to all both of us listening. Let's see. Ian Dreyer has been in the chat for a while. What's up, Ian? And what's up, Pete? 12-team Superflex PPR tight end premium start 10. Nico Collins for Pacheco and a 25-second. I think it's fairly even. If I was winning now, I guess you prefer the running back who could be top 12 versus a wide receiver who could repeat, especially since I'm a little on the outs on Nico's repeat ability. Given the congested situation and my general low tones on his profile, I think he's a top 15 wide receiver at this point. I think that's more reasonable expectation. And you're getting some low draft capital there, but it really only works if you're in for Pacheco for this year to be a top 12 running back, and then it makes sense for kind of a team pushing to win this year. Value-wise, if you put it into the Dynasty Trade Calculator, I imagine this is a little low. Zach, what are your thoughts?
This is usually, although I'd rather be getting a pick back, but this is a similar trade to how I tend to operate with running backs. where like Pacheco's given you a couple of good years, and yes, he's still on the ascension arc, but you can go get Nico Collins, who, ostensibly is if not the top tier, he's in that like middle tier. He's a top 12 wide receiver right now in terms of dynasty. And so it may not be Collins that I would target, but I do like this trade. And if you're a Nico Collins guy, I don't mind getting Collins for this. And you're talking about giving up Collins for Pacheco in a second. I think Peter hit it on the head. This is a play for this year, assuming that Nico Collins is going to be outscored by Pacheco, and then you're getting a little bit of a bump to go, do something again next year too. So, yeah, Ian, I don't hate this trade either way. I think it's pretty even. It's kind of team construction. It's a beautiful trade in terms of you're not going 1-for-1 positionally. So both teams can
benefit.
Yeah,
both teams okay. Grow in
slightly
different direction. Yeah, I like it. I think what's going on. I'm prepared to be low on Nico Collins, but I think everyone's a little low on Pacheco, and so this kind of balances out in the wash on me. For his redraftability anyway. Nico, Waddle, or Olave? I would go Waddle, Olave, Nico.
Yep, I agree with you.
My order.
We're unlocked today. It's like we haven't missed a beat.
Dame Overboard says, evening, Dame Overboard. And also has a trade or a question. Start 11, Superflex received. Offer for Olave for my 25 and 26 first. 2 firsts is fair. No, I think that's a pretty good offer. But first are liquid, first are building assets. If your team's in the middle, this is good. And if it's at the top, this is good. If your team's building, there's no need to do it, but I think it's fine. You can probably do more over time with those first to maneuver and position yourself and stuff like that. But I still think getting a young wide receiver will be decent for a building team. So overall, it's a yes. But is it too much? No, nowhere near too much. It's fine. He has Hill, Jefferson, Ross St. Brown, Pittman, and JSN. So you have good wide receivers. I can understand your hesitation. I'm probably not burning first in your situation. Hill's getting alone. Jefferson forever. Ross St. Brown forever. Pittman's fine. JSN, we hope. The rest don't matter, but that's nice of you to tell us. I'm not sure Carr makes it happen for Olave. I think if anyone, I don't know. I'm not really a football guy. And I don't know. The Carr Olave pairing seems fair. I think Carr can supply it to an average Dalton level extent, and Olave can scoop up volume where he lives. That's what he's kind of been doing. It's that top 12 ceiling. If that's what you need out of Olave, yeah. I mean, it's hard to say he's a breakout candidate, but he's not outside the range of reality. His team situation certainly hasn't improved. So, if you're going for ceiling, maybe not. Yeah.
It's
according to you. I've blathered on long.
No, it's interesting that our first 3 questions kind of all overlap. And I think that your answer to the second question, where you went Waddle, Olave, Collins, it kind of dovetails into my answer to this third question. And Dame, I like, this is not a bad offer for Olave, and you're getting like a quasi proven for 2 unproven assets. But if it's me, I would rather take those 2 first and try to get into Garrett Wilson, try to get into Jalen Waddle. I am.
So there's more you would want to do with 2 firsts and Olave, but this is fine if you like Olave.
Yeah, and like I still have, and I haven't ever been, and if I'm gonna be wrong, that's fine. But Olave was a little bit down my list in that 2022 class when I did evaluations on receivers. So he was not my favorite receiver in a class that's not my favorite class. He's been good, but hasn't done. He hasn't even done the things that Garrett Wilson has done in terms of driving targets and that sort of thing. And if you're going to use Carr as an excuse for Olave, then the train wreck that has been the New York Jets quarterback position. I mean, it's not a bad offer, but there are pivots that I would rather make than trade those two first for Olave.
Yeah, it's one of those things where if you're asking me the value, I think that's good. I think I'd be in 7 out of 10 situations pretty happy with that trade. But the other question is that's where I'm throwing my value. The one thing to consider here, Dane, and I don't want to talk you out of it or into it, to be clear. I've said it's fairly good. If you like it, you like it. But you seem a little hesitant, to be fair. It's who are you targeting with your value? You only have so much on a dynasty roster at any given time. And so whittling down your targets of who you would move value for is a better way to go. Wilson's a big one for you. Do I have big ones? Not really right now. But I think that's going to be a question. Like, are there other players you want to go get? Because that 2 firsts could help you go and do that. And you probably should. Like, if you're nervous about Hill, I think now is a better time to be nervous about him in a year when everyone's going to say he's old, when it still won't be significant to his points per game, but it's when everyone's going to start telling you no one else knows, even though everyone realizes at the same time. And that despite his high points per game output, which is why he should be valued for that for at least 2 more years, and it's actually only going to be 1, the value is going to disappear. Despite that, because we hate age, especially when the performance can't be replicated. He'll still be a top 12 guy, so it'll be great. So adding one of those first to Hill probably gets you closer to a lot of things you'd be more interested in on this roster. Or both of those first to Hill probably gets you a lot of what you want. And so it's about who are your targets? What are you trying to do with this team? Who do you really want to add? What do you really want to add? Those are the questions I'd ask for whether you should do this trade or not. Not whether the trade's fair. Trade's perfectly fair.
How close do you think you could get to DK Metcalf or Devontae Smith?
That's a good name.
With a first.
Smith, Metcalf, yeah.
Like, so you wouldn't have to.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have to run. Like, to me,
do any of that.
Yeah, there are other directions that I would rather.
Wide receiver is in a bit of a bubble right now, so the guys that are actually carrying their value, and rightly, kind of sussy. When you can get a Smith, get a DK Metcalf who's falling, that's a good point as well. It's probably not the best time to go in at value on young wide receivers or wide receivers in general.
Nice.
Placed my HBB OB order earlier. Nice.
The happy birthday, Bob. That's awesome.
Does the punt return news make you rethink Kyron? I guess we have to start with what was I thinking about Kyron anyway. But the answer is no. I haven't really thought Kyron Williams. I still think he's got a pretty high potential this year. He's in a good situation, does the right kind of things, especially for fantasy to have a decent floor and ceiling. He's like Pacheco, a little undervalued because we don't like running backs right now, so they're slightly risky because of draft capital concerns. Probably it's a little easier to buy into the running back market, and Kyron and Pacheco, Kamara, or for examples of those that thing. But no, kick return news doesn't move my needle too much. Zach, you're a little more what happens on the field since you watch.
Well, I mean, he returned punts he did that last year. So it's not, I don't think it's necessarily a big surprise. In the Scott Fish Bowl, people are just now having the epiphany that he
right.
is that I got him. I got him. Wow. So I got him in the 4th round of both the Scott Fish Bowl and an SFB mirror league. And it shocked me then, and now I continue to be pretty happy that it is. I don't think it changes his role as a running back as to what it would have been. Blake Corum is there, so there may be a little bit more of a split than there was last year, but I don't think it's going to be anything that takes Kyron out of contention for like a top 4 or 5 running back if he stays healthy. So like it not really. Again, because he did that last year, so it's not something necessarily new, if that makes sense, Cody.
Yeah. Drew Sorensen Music, welcome back, bud. Startup Dynasty, 12 teams, start 11 Superflex, QB 6-point passing touchdowns, -3 for incompletions. Okay. Gave the 207, the 506, the 706, got the 105. These are all rookie picks. As picks, do you like this trade? Well, yeah, anything below
startup Dynasty. So he's trading picks.
I did read those words at the start. That makes more sense.
Yeah.
I'd have to look at a draft, all my draft sheet to remember what kind of is going in the 5th or 7th round. It's been a minute. I think you're trading into a stud with 3 lower picks, but those picks don't seem out of contention for grabbing a DK or a Devontae Smith. Brandon Ayuk goes in the 4th. That gives me some context. I'm not sure exactly. Zach, you want to talk?
I mean, so you're getting one of the top tier quarterbacks, but you're giving up an awful lot. You're giving up either a second tier quarterback or one of those high end wide receivers or running backs, and then you're giving up like some middle of the pack, like Pacheco-ish, Pitts, that area, like a couple of those players. Or some of the rookie wide receivers, so it's a lot, but you're paying up to get somebody like Lamar Jackson or Mahomes. You're not getting Allen or Hurts there, but one of those players. I probably would not. And if you have the 207 in a 12 team, oh no, that's yours. Got 105. So you had the 106. I think it's a lot to give up. Like usually when I do something like that, it will be, the second, it will be a pick swap in another round, and then I give up the 5 and get a 8th or 9th or 10th back. So you're moving back a ways to flat out give up these picks. Again, I get the idea, and I understand that you're trying to get, top heavy, and that's not a bad way to do it. But I do think you end up giving up an awful lot. I think you can get sneaky, especially if you, in the startup, have your next year's picks. That may even be a better way. I often do that where I'll trade away. Last year I did a startup in Trade Addicts 11 before the season, and I gave up my 2024 picks. So I didn't have much for picks at all this year, but I ended up with a winning roster because I could trade this year's picks to go get that win and now have some time to play with. But this one seems like it's a little heavy on the outgoing side of things.
Sorry, I forgot to mute. I think the trade's fine. It's one of those. What do you get with those picks? And just for context, for my own edification, essentially Zach's right. With a top 5 pick, you get more of the quarterbacks, but it's Lamar Jackson, Anthony Richardson, Joe Burrow.
He got Jackson. So he got Jackson for Gibbs, Rashad White, and Stephon Diggs.
You could reach a little in Kyler Murray, but just pure value. The thing is, right now, especially with the 207, you can get Justin Herbert, or you could get Marvin Harrison or Amon-Ra St. Brown in that range. Again, it's about who takes, and so it's a little hard to say which way I'd like to go. What I can tell you in general, and that 5th and 7th round pick is fine. Some interesting picks there, but we're outside of the lusty range. There is Mark Andrews, Pickens, if you're that way inclined. Deshaun Watson, if you wanted a quarterback. In the 7th, you've got Diggs or Hawkinson or, Amari Cooper. It's fine. I don't think the trade's necessarily bad. It's just what I can tell you in general, where things are. I'm much more be inclined to target Justin Herbert at the end of the 2nd than I would to try and grab the last guy, my last favorite guy in that top 5 tier, just because of where the values are right now. Quarterback underperformed last year a little bit, and so I'm not saying like there's a bubble like wide receiver or quarterbacks won't maintain that value. No, they're all great quarterbacks. But Justin Herbert, Dak Prescott both stand out to me as pretty significant values, and when going into a draft, I'm going to be highlighting, especially in a superflex, those type of values. And for me, that means I'm less likely to target the top 5 a little bit, just a smidge. CJ Stroud's in that top 5, but I think he's a little inflated because of the phenomenal rookie year. And so my inclination would be not to, but I don't think it's a bad trade at all. The trade wound up being Lamar Gibbs, except Rashad White and Stephen Diggs was a name that stood out to me in that 7th. Again, it's fine. You'd probably say I'd probably do that trade in the league too. I think the trade's fine. It's just it depends who gets taken, and you can never know that when you're trading people. To start with, appreciate you, fellas. No problem, Dave. Donut Bogo, Zach.
I'm in. Let's go.
Happy birthday, Bob. Thank you, Dave. We trade an apple fritter for Boston cream and a donut to be named later.
So normally, Bob, yes, but if it's the apple fritter from the mom and pop donut shop in Canton, there's zero chance I'm giving that up. We found a pretty good place in Canton.
The team from that startup so far is Lamar Burrow, which again you got that nice pairing for spending the value, and which should last you a good long time. London, Nico, Rashi Rice, Godwin, and Njoku. So you just get a little thin, a little quick in your other positions because you traded some of that elite high tier depth. That makes sense. So I think you grab some good values with Connor and Brian Robinson. Nice to see the extra running backs getting picked up. That's cool. Rashi Rice could really pay off at that price too. Godwin solid. The team's going well by the look of it. Again, in general, I'm more inclined to try and target the mid-late second to grab Herbert. And that's roughly what my mind is when I head into a Superflex draft, if I were to do so right now. But yeah, and that's it. Those are all the questions. Oh, God, that was such an epic. That was the longest one yet, I think. Can I go eat something? No, you take 2 weeks off, everyone forgets. I get it. Zach, how was Canton? I don't think I've spoken to you since then.
How was Canton? Was fantastic. It was beautiful weather. We didn't get monsooned on. The Fantasy Cares booth was tremendous, and I don't know. It's always a blast, Peter. But Rashi, I got in the 6, which I think it will be a steal, especially this year. Are you really not hearing that? I keep getting a bunch of feedback.
Sorry.
Well, if it's on my end, that's good. I mean, I'll take it. But I got new headphones, so.
I got a question by DM. You want to hear it?
Yeah.
He really needs help, apparently. Spencer asks a little bit of the situation, but it's a 12-team standard dynasty. I don't think he means standard scoring. I just think he means standard dynasty league. 2 QBs, 2 running backs, 1 wide receiver. Wait. No, 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receiver, 1 tight end, 3 flex. He thinks he's in a win now season. A fringe playoff team is a little fragile and is interested. Justin Jefferson's burning a hole in his pocket. He wants James Conner, Debo, Diggs for JJ, and I would say super yes. He says super hard to pass up on that from a dynasty perspective, obviously, but being heavy in a win now mode, I don't know if I can pull the trigger. Connor's running back 4. Okay, non-dynasty. And Debo, wide receiver 3, wide receiver 2, minimum. Diggs, wide receiver 4. Yeah, it's a solid roster. I can't believe I'm leaning towards declining. I can't believe you're leaning towards declining either. You get younger, you get better points per game, and you get an asset that's going to last longer than anything that you listed. And on your side, there's no downside as far as I can tell from Dynasty outside of your points per game output. Well, it's going to be lower based on just the sum total, but I think you get more in a single spot than you have right now, and I think that has more value. So yeah, for me, that's a pretty easy yes, even on a win now team. And Zach, to reiterate, Justin Jefferson 4, James Conner, Debo, Diggs, and that's it. Pretty easy win.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'd take Jefferson for that. I mean, I know that it's hard to give that up because of the win now, but man, that feels like a Jefferson.
Yeah, like I want to go all in on winning, but you're making several bets on those players hitting those numbers that you said already, and Jefferson's more secure in his range of outcomes and can easily help you win on a win now. And there are the running backs I've targeted right now. Anyway. So yeah, that's Jefferson easily. But that's a 1 DM question I got. If I mute.
No, they're all hearing it too. They're all hearing the feedback. Yeah, I keep hearing. I don't hear it now, but it's like clicking. It almost sounds like when I'm dating myself now, but when you were younger and somebody's cell phone went off and it
right,
make that like
it might be. I'm using wireless headphones. It could be that.
Oh, I don't know. I'm not hearing it now anyway, so we'll take it.
I'll move my phone over here. Now it's gone. Stopped. Sounds like a loose connection or something, not grounded properly. Nothing here is grounded in reality. Something with cell phone location. Probably. Okay, I moved it. Give me a break. I think the sound is coming from Peter's end. Todd, don't pile on. Trust me, there's enough people coming at me. It's always my fault. I get it. No, you get it. Nico at his current cost. Appropriate? Yeah. I just don't think wide receivers, unless they seem like epic values, are good buys, quote unquote, right now in general. Like Jefferson at that price, yes. But wide receiver market seems a little squidgy, a little soft. It's been too high for too long, damn it. And there's only so much value in a dynasty league. But Stroud is good. Stroud is very good. Yeah. Will he be funny. Mahomes? Will he be Allen every year? Maybe. Same with Lamar Jackson. I mean, there's a whole bunch there that have trouble keeping pace with Mahomes and with Allen every year, but they have it in their range of outcomes. But so does Herbert, so does Dak, so does a few that aren't pushed up into that top tier, basically because of preference, or in Stroud's case, newness and age, because people think that matters at quarterback, which it does not matter at quarterback in Dynasty. So yeah, that's all I'm saying. It's not that he shouldn't be there. It's just that if we put everyone with that in their range of outcomes in that tier, then suddenly those with that in their range of outcomes that aren't in their tier, those are the ones I'm going to go target, instead of the others that are actually held at that Mahomes Allen price, which is what the others are essentially having happened to them in Dynasty, in real life. Okay, no should they. Obviously.
Yeah, and again, this goes back to kind of the way I play this time of year, where I'll go find an ADP list and scroll down to about pick 40 and go from like pick 40 to about pick 80 and look at players that I think I want on my team because they're going to be better than that. And so it ends up looking like, like DK Metcalf, like Debo Samuels, the wide receivers that I think can elevate, even Tank Dell, who's going at wide receiver 25. Like, and again, it's not to say Nico Collins is a bad player or even that he's overvalued at wide receiver 11, because I don't necessarily think that he is, but a lot of things broke right last year, and that's about where he finished. So, and as a third year breakout, so like it's not an anti-Nico take by any stretch. It's he's a good receiver. He's in a good situation with a good quarterback for at least the foreseeable future. But there are other players I think I can acquire cheaper that will give me a similar range of production outcomes and be able to, if I acquire them cheaper, if DK Metcalf all of a sudden is wide receiver 6 this year, he's not going to go in the 5th or 6th round of startups next year, which means that not only do you get a year of points production, but you also get a nice out on a player like that. And I don't think he drops very much further than where he is. So there's not a lot of assumed risk because he's already going, low, where Nico Collins, if Nico Collins performs the way you hope he does, you already drafted him at that cost. So there's not a lot of gain. Now, if you got Nico Collins on your team, now we're in a different proposition. So like the acquisition cost of Nico Collins, but the production value and having him on your team, now that's something I want. So like, I don't want to acquire him, but if I already got him, then I'm very happy to have him. He's one of those players for me.
Yeah, just looking at my value list and my rank sheet, like there's only 2, 3, 4 wide receivers in the top 20 of my values. And that's Justin Jefferson, because I'm not ranking Justin Jefferson even a spot lower than anyone else because I'm not an idiot. Stephon Diggs, who you get, like we were saying, like the 7th round. It's an age discount. Deebo Samuel, because I've been high on Deebo for a minute because I never believed the Brandon Ayuk bubble when it turns up. And so far I've been profiting from that. And George Pickens, I didn't expect his name, but there you go. Those are the only 4 on like my top 20 targets. After that, it's quarterback, and it's Jalen Hurts. He's a guy in that plethora of quarterback. I'm like, yes, I not only see Mahomes and Allen year to year, I've seen it in back-to-back year to years. That's what that guy has that the others don't. So, like, that's a guy I would go up and get if I was trying to go get someone in that range as an extra. Because he's quite often held slightly below him just because, he's a new hotness, not the old hotness. Sometimes new isn't good, I guess. Don't know why you're all doing that. But then it's players that I think have something like that top 12, top 5 range of outcomes, but aren't held there. And it's Tua Tagovailoa, interestingly enough. I'm not overly high, but when he's QB 15 and you're putting Stroud and Anthony Richardson, who, might have a lot wider range of outcomes, true. But, the median outcome is fairly similar. And I've actually seen Tua perform fairly adequately as a top 12. I think that's interesting at QB 15, like pick 80. So I don't have to trade in the top 10 picks and I can get that in the range of outcomes. And Kyler Murray, Justin Herbert, Dak Prescott. Those are the quarterbacks I would target. And you notice most of them are going outside those first 3 rounds. That's why they're interesting to me. All 3 of those. And then it's running backs. It's a whole bunch of second-year running backs, first-year running backs. Christian McCaffrey, because you're all silly for thinking he's old ever. Even Eckler, Braylon Allen, Tank Bigsby. It's not exciting running backs. I'm not taking them in this order, but that's what's standing out my ranks versus consensus. Like I'm really interested in grabbing some running backs, all throughout the draft because that's the position that stands out to me. Outside of that, and the quarterback thing stands out because it's super flex, but it's tight end. I think Kittle's at least 20 spots underrated. And even Brock Bowers, like he's accurately ranked positionally, but I'm willing to reach on that range of outcomes like a round ahead of where everyone else, apparently by consensus, when you group them all together, are ranking him. And so tight end's interesting to me as well as wide receivers a little. I got some shots here and there, and Jefferson obviously, but there's no one that's like I'm listing after right now. I dragged that out as long as I could. It's all I got. Drafting someone that retains the same value is good. No one retains values move up and down. The only real value in Dynasty is what can you do with them in your league. Like, you need a running back for the last week so that you can win. Can this player get that for you? And in Jefferson, it's hell yes. And if it's Nico Collins, it's maybe. What running back are we talking? So there's never an actual value, and it's all about your league, your league mates, and how they feel that way. So it's all a little bit of a pretense to talk about it like it's a market, but we're all coming up with some kind of basic idea just to help us navigate what we want to do with other teams. That's the way I think of it. If they maintain the same value, it's not bad. It's not good. Depending on your team situation, it could be crucial. If you're building, you really don't want to lose value, the ability to do stuff with your team from one year to the next, because you're trying to acquire more of that. If you're trying to win, I don't care if the player loses if he helped you win, especially, or maybe just came close to winning, right? Because the whole game is getting more points per game. And so it's kind of a seesaw effect, and it's all very actually league dependent. That's what I try and emphasize. Like, we talk about this, as Zach calls it, 10,000 foot view or 30,000 foot view in terms of ADP in markets. Really, the only way it actually applies is what do the people in your league say, which is where Leo Seeger and Zach and J Mike come in, talking about psychology and thinking and learning about your league mates. What do they like? What do they not do? And that's why you can actually get a better, perhaps real sense of what value is in your league. But it's always going to shift around a little bit. Yeah.
It's interesting to me, Drew, where Nico Collins is being drafted right now, and the group or tier of receivers that he's with, because he is kind of sandwiched in with Jalen Waddle, Chris Olave, Drake London, Brandon Ayuk, Odunze. So there is a lot of kind of nebulousness and hope there. And so, like, I agree with you that Nico Collins, outside of maybe Waddle in that group, is the one. I guess Ayuk has too, but he's got so much going on right now in San Francisco. But like, most of those players haven't done it yet, and Nico Collins has. And so I get that. And Waddle has. And to me, it's not just retaining value. And Peter, like, you were thinking of it in terms of like ADP and movement up and down. To me, at this point, we're almost toward thinking about points. And I think Nico Collins is a fairly good points play. I don't know that he'll necessarily be the 17, 16 point a game player that he was last year, because there is the addition of Stephon Diggs. Again, maybe that's good. I know, like, good offense, good players, that is beneficial, but it also is going to almost necessitate at least a little bit of shift in targets if Diggs is what we think Diggs is, because Diggs has always been that wide receiver one who has commanded a large target share. So it's not like drafting Nico Collins at ADP right now is not a bad play. I don't dislike it. I mean, there are a couple of players around there that I would probably go with instead, but it's not a bad play at all. He, though, again, I don't see a world where in 3 years he is still wide receiver 11, whereas, Waddle, I see, could have a jump. You've got Malik Neighbors there right in front of him who probably will have a jump. You have it's just an interesting, because to me, they're the three phases of value. So you've got the ADP, like the way people value, and that's kind of projecting out a few years. You've got the points value, which is closer to redraft, which is like what guys are going to score you now. And then you have the, like, I can dream on them, which is where we get into the ageism. And so, like, Nico Collins isn't quite out of the I can dream on him, but he's also 25. and like I can dream on him is getting toward the end of where the community will be. And it's not he's a good pick and a good player.
It's like you're saying he's in the right spot, but you prefer a couple of others around. Like your rankings in that tier are slightly different. It's very different than saying he's overranked or underranked or a value or a sell. Like, I get it. That's fair. And if you're thinking points, and that's where I go back to positions. Like, again, I'm not saying I would trade 1-for-1 for these, but that's what I see when I look at ADP. I'm not thinking I'm going to get exactly this value and exactly this value, because that's not the way people work. Like, you can't show them the list and say you have to trade this player for this player, you see? And so I tend to think about it a little more broadly, a little more navel-gazingly. And, like, if you're thinking about Collins for points, below that whole tier, is Travis Etienne, and there's Kyron Williams, who we already spoke about, and there's Saquon Barkley. Like, if you want points, putting in the running back position is generally more interesting anyway, because that top tier points is a little harder to get, or that higher tier points. And even if they scored similarly, I'd rather have the running back points in a vacuum. And again, it's not 1-for-1. I trade this player for that player, but it just means that running backs right now, but below players that we all reasonably expect a similar range of points per game, but you're getting a running back. That's interesting. And again, Kyron Williams has value concerns, all running backs too, whereas Travis Etienne and Saquon Barkley probably don't for this time next year, which is as much as you can really hope for a running back, to be fair. And so even if we're thinking pure points, I don't think the wide receivers are quite in the right spot. And so you really, if you're going to pick one of those wide receivers, or you're thinking about that list, that tier, it goes to Zach's point. Like, Nico Collins is 25. He's done it once. It was a weird year. He's now in and you get into context. It's not predicting, I know for sure, but these are the things that are going to weigh your opinion one way or the other. The person we were just talking about, Chris Olave's in that tier, and he's a little less excited about Chris Olave, and so the idea would be to go grab someone else that you're more excited. If they're at the right place, if the value's about right, that's not a good enough reason to do a trade or a move for me. And it's about what my team needs more than anything else, not the players' names. They really don't matter. And whether you're building value or building points. And once you separate it out into those categories, if you're an active team trying to actually engage in this season rather than just pure building, there are more interesting options at Nico Collins' range. And I want to go see if they're available in my league before I trade for Collins, if you know what I mean. Yeah. I'm belaboring the point here. But those players will also be second. That doesn't matter to me at all.
Oh, that's the
I also that it really shows up when you're thinking about these level of players, and we're talking points and value, and you realize that who's first and who's second is just arbitrary definition anyway. So yeah, it really doesn't matter. Again, all these guys, the two that have been in the top 12, Jalen Waddle and Nico Collins in this tier. So literally the sample size we're looking at is even. You can be a 2, you can be a 1 by your definition of who is a 2 and a 1. And still get a top 12 guy. Devontae Smith is slightly below even ETM, by the way. Roma Dunze, if you're that way inclined, I guess. Yeah. Sorry. Name's called my Metcalf is below all of that.
But this goes back to and again, I think a lot of people get caught up in this, but every year, almost invariably every year, but the average is 4 teams support 2 top 24 wide receivers.
At least, yeah.
So, if there are only 24 top 24 wide receivers and 4 teams support 2, that means that means that 8 are gone. There are a lot of ones that I don't want, and Nico Collins is not one of those. But saying that because he is a 1, that doesn't necessarily mean that those other players aren't going to get it done in terms of production. I mean, it was Debo and Brandon Ayuk were within a point per game of Collins last year, and one of them was a 2. I don't know which one, but one of them was a 2. They were probably 2 and 3 because McCaffrey was the one. But that's not necessarily like I'm not worried about the how we're labeling them. And again, and I think you're hearing that Nico Collins is bad, and that's not what that's
We're
not
desperately
it.
trying to avoid. Again,
Nico,
the players' names don't matter whether I like or it's not really the thing. We think it's exactly in that range, and if you like Nico Collins, add Nico Collins. You gotta like your team.
And Drew, I would much rather draft him there than trade pieces to get into there. So
that's a good way of thinking about it.
In a startup, I'm happy to because you're spending one startup pick. That's fine. Once you start making a trade for Nico Collins, somebody who has him rostered now is necessarily invested because they have Nico Collins, who scored 17 points a game last year in PBR. And so you're going to have to pay for Nico Collins as if he's going to be a 17-point-a-game wide receiver, which he may be. But there's also
one way to put it into context for myself is I made a points per game model, which predicts how much points per game we draft at each ADP. So when a player scores this ADP, what was his points per game that year, and then it tries to model that forward. So Nico Collins scored 17 points per game this year. Where he's being drafted, based on that very crappy model, because I built it. It's not like a statistician wouldn't like it, but it's like 13 points per game. We're already drafting him at an expected drop slightly, but that's the same for Waddle and Olave. Like they're all in a similar range, right? So he is adjusted for based on the could he really sustain that? That's what we're saying. It's not like he's bad. It's that he's fine, because he can take a dip in points per game, and that would still be a good place to have drafted him, as long as he maintains 12 13 points per game. That was a fairly, but again, that's another way of thinking about what is a good value. And the real question is, this time next year, are you happy to have Collins on your roster because you can do about the same or even more than you could do with him before? And to Zach's point, in season, what his value is going to be is he a great start every week? And so there's no actual value. There's no absolute value, if you will. It's kind of all of those things. And we're trying to answer from at least 3 different perspectives: building team, competitive team, and the time of year that we're looking at. That's where our answers tend to wander around. Again, we do those Rate My League shows, and we do some other things where there's people ask direct questions here, and that's good too, because talking about value and markets is all pie in the sky stuff. It's a fun way to think about it, but then you go and try some of it in your league. And my experience is, despite how much time we spend talking about it here, it doesn't always pay off, but it pays off enough. I find the effort worth it. Same with ADP. It rarely pays off doing all these mocks or having all these sites with these different competing ideas of value. But it's a good framing device to put yourself in I want to do this with my team. This would be always positive. This will be a good way to try and compete this year. And then go and try and apply it to your league. And again, 90% of it's going to fail. Because your league mates aren't slouches, or they're really slouches and they just don't know what they should do with it, whatever you want to see. But it rarely reflects, which is why something that's a little more this league is probably more appropriate, and why we try and do more direct content these days than the broad stuff. So yeah, I'm talking just for the sake of one more comment, just to drag it out. Todd Radmaker, non-PPR trade, T. Higgins and Evan Engram for George Pickens and Alvin Kamara. Interesting in a non-PPR league. I think Higgins is more a PPR play. Ingram is a tight end, so touchdowns are mostly what you're going for. But of the tight ends, he's a targets guy, a PPR guy. I would imagine. I'd have to look at that. Pickens makes sense in a non-PPR to have probably a high value. He's a highlight reel player. If nothing else, the floor is he's going to do some fun stuff, maybe score some big long touchdowns. But Kamara is pure PPR, right? I don't think he has near the verve. No, near the I can't even think of the word viability in a non-PPR league. So I think I like the Higgins Ingram side, but it's a little hard for me to balance because I'm so used to looking at their points in terms of PPR. Zach, am I missing something about their potential in that scoring format? Because it seems like the Higgins Ingram side to me.
No, I think you're right, but only because of, for me, if we're talking, I assume we're talking Dynasty, Todd. I have a lot more faith in Ingram to be around for, 2 or 3 years and be up around the top of that position. Kamara's fine in standard because he scores a lot of touchdowns, and even receptions are actually like valuable in standard, even if they're not as valuable as they are in PPR. So he was like last year points per game, like cusp top 12 running back. I don't know that either of the receivers were even close to that. I think I prefer T. Higgins to Pickens, and then it's kind of a wash. It's positional advantage. I'll take Ingram, but it's not like I don't think that either side is blowing this one out of the water. But I would rather have the Higgins and Ingram side. You muted. You look good, though.
Alan Davis, we had a 1 QB 10-team draft finish up Sunday. I picked a Dunze at 103, Brooks at 107, Daniels at 110. Pretty good. I'm wondering about that 3 pick, but that's not hard. To the 203, 207 for a 25 first. That's a clear win, in my opinion. Yeah, it's hunting for better running backs. I like that. Then got Burton at 303. I think that's a very solid draft. Especially if you're in on the Adunze camp, I think his value is gonna. He doesn't have to do much to pay off because we're waiting for it, and he looked like a pretty good player in college, so he should do enough to excite the hive, as it were, and maintain his value. Yeah, 600 yards. You know what I ask him?
I really like that, especially to me the best pick out of that entire thing.
Daniels at 110.
Yeah. Well, Daniels at 110 is really nice, but getting Brooks at the 107 in a 1 quarterback is pretty fantastic, I think. Even with the injury and the fact that he's probably going to miss just a little bit at the beginning of the season, I still think in a down running back class, he was at the top of it. So,
yeah. Hey guys, happy Wednesday. How do you weigh situation versus talent in Dynasty? Is there a point in a player's career where you weigh one above the other? Situations change, tends to be the way I balance these things. So if I'm confident in what a player is, that's a different question. But I hope the situation changes. Justin Herbert right now. Let's go. Whereas if I'm less confident, then the situation might weigh more heavily on me because I don't know what to expect if the situation was neutral. But that's where I tend to lean. I will go on the player as much as I can rather than the situation because situations are constantly changing. Zach, got a more concrete idea?
No, I mean for me, it's almost
Neighbors and Pickens are a good question. Good names to bring up in this.
For me, it's almost invariably talent, especially at wide receiver. Like there's a little bit of you can finagle a little bit with running back because so much matters about whether or not they're on the field, and they're also dependent a lot more on the offensive line. But if you're using the Neighbors or Pickens on bad offenses, last year, Chicago's offense wasn't very good. Last year, Las Vegas's offense wasn't very good. Last year, even Cincinnati's offense wasn't very good. And you still got DJ Moore and Devontae Adams and Jamar Chase in the top of their respective, like the wide receiver. They're all top 12. So like situation matters. Situation definitely helps out good players, but you got to be a good player for situation to matter. So I'd rather have it be a good player.
Players do create the situations. I mean, it's like if you lose a good player, that's not, they're going to get all the targets, the vacated targets myth. It's the team got worse. That's a bad thing for the players left on it. And that's the way I tend to think as well.
And
it's AJ Brown in Tennessee right after Corey Davis was in Tennessee. And I had a lot of hope. I had a lot of shares of Corey Davis. And I was like, that wasn't so bad. And then he had a top 24 season and I went nuts on Twitter. And then they brought in A.J. Brown, and A.J. Brown showed what a better player could do in that exact same situation. And it was a lot better. And you see it constantly. Like Hopkins moves from Houston, and immediately that other team suddenly has a great wide receiver. It's not a coincidence that the player's talent seems to go with them, if you know what I mean. But again, there is a cap. At a certain point, like Hopkins is not QB proof. He has had bad seasons, and the main reason seems to be the situation was freaking awful. So there is still some of a balance, but in general, I'm always going to lean on that, what I know of a player. Yeah.
It's also
my neighbors in the Giants. I'm not excited about that, but I'm not moving him down an iota in my estimation, because I think he's going to make something out of that situation that others would not.
Yeah, and I think it's also harder to predict both of those things than we like to think. But I think it's easier to predict a good player than it is to predict a good situation versus bad situation, because there's so many more pieces to that. So, Frank, if you're looking at an offense, there are 10 other players in that offense. And also the defense plays a part in whether or not the offense is successful, because if you have a defense that is not great, your offense is on the field a lot, and they're also trying to play from behind, which means they're trying to throw the ball. So like there's so many different pieces that are involved in situation, under that situation umbrella, as opposed to whether or not this one player that we can look at, whether or not we think they're good. And we still miss that. I mean, rookies, we miss that 45, 50% of the time if we're real good. So but I think we're better at that than we are predicting good situations. So I again, all of that to say, I generally go with the player over the situation, because I don't think a good situation makes a bad player good, but a good player can make a bad situation a good situation for fantasy.
Yep.
So
that
was to you.
It's bad luck. So, Soros, what order do you want these 5 players, if you had to, in PPR? Sutton, Mims, Josh Reynolds. I leave the league. Troy Franklin, Devon Via. I don't even know that guy.
He's just ragging on you that Tim Patrick was cut.
Right. I leave the league and draft Tim Patrick somewhere else. No, I guess it's
Sutton.
Mims, basically maybe he's a little earlier in his career. Maybe there's a ceiling there. Reynolds is a more solid pick if you just need you definitely need some weeks this year to start a flex or start a third wide receiver. I guess, it's this order. I probably put Franklin over Reynolds just because of ceiling, and Vio stays at the bottom until I learn who he is. So
I only want Sutton, Flo. That's it. Just Sutton.
The rest, even Sutton's a bit roster cloggery, to be honest. No, Tim hate.
He might be the wide receiver 2 on the Lions.
He was in the wide receiver 2 fair. But the receiver 3, maybe.
Yeah.
Thanks for the ordering. No problem, Slosaurus. I'm sure it was very helpful. So there's a short video of a dog playing on Twitter, and it's very distracting for me. I just want to watch the dog. Frank in the chat, with DPG gone, did he go? I honestly didn't really realize he existed. Are you guys with me on Jameson Williams? No, I still think he's past his arc, and I wasn't. Again, players over situations, so we weren't like, ooh, who's going to get all the targets, and now DPJ is gone and Wilson gets all the targets. I'm a little concerned that he's past the point we would usually, even with injuries, typically have seen something pretty special from a guy who's going to produce something special from Williams. But it is a little vague-ish, like injuries really can't be accounted for on this, just no one's been hurt that many times or missed that many games. It's a little hard, but there's no precedence for it, and so I'm kind of on the outs if it has value. And I don't think targets work like that. I know target share might be low, but he doesn't really need it. I mean, he needs some. But I get what you mean. If you're just looking for a wide receiver 3 flyer, a guy who can score a long touchdown, yeah. I don't think his value's bad. I don't think his draft round's bad. And if you're just taking a shot at a wide receiver there, there's definitely an upside in a Williams versus most of the players that are drafted around him. Don't get it twisted, like we were saying with Collins. I think it's fairly fair value and pick and keep on your roster and hope. But if you're asking, will he finish top 24? Will he finish top 12? I don't think so in points per game or overall points. And process says no, whatever that's worth. But isn't Jameson in his third year? Yeah. But again, we usually see something before a breakout. I know this is hard to short, but like even second year breakouts, 50% above 50% of them were in the top 24 before they entered the top 12 in year 2. And 70% of them at least hit the top 36. And now in year 3, they definitely absolutely have a top 36 season and very likely came close to being a top 12 player before their third year. It's not like, I think that's what we used to miss with second and third year breakouts. Like, he's still in the arc. No, because most players who break out in year 3 already broke out at different levels and did other things, like the vast majority before that breakout. Just because it's year 3 doesn't mean he has that percentage chance. No, he looks nothing like every player in that category, because most, in fact, the vast majority did not. Did a lot more before their third year, and I think that's significant. But you know, there's all those that 30% you can bet on, but that to me is the definition of taking a 30% bet at a 70% price and saying and not understanding it. If you know, not that you're doing that, but yeah, it's a lot less likely than most third year breakouts you could name right now at his current value. But yeah, I wouldn't give up hope, because there is that 20 something to 30% of players who just come from nowhere. Nico Collins was one in year 2. He didn't do much in year 1, not enough to impress me, but enough that his ADP fell into a reasonable range, so I was fine with it finally again, to be clear. And like this is where the process, I hope the one I'm trying to build works even when I don't know the future, because I know I can't predict the future. If you know what I mean. That's why we're always a little cagey around Collins. His value is fine now. We're pretty good with it. I'm not ignoring it, but I'm not going all in on it. Year 1 for Collins was not going all in on it at all. It looked like a hard sell. Year 2, it was fine, because while I still didn't think it was going to happen, the price to get in was still fine. And so you try and have your cake and eat it too, because I definitely don't know these players, let alone the future, let alone more about football than anyone else. So like I try and just find reasonable places to go in and out. Williams seems fine, but if asked outright, are you expecting it? No, because he looks like the minority of group that do anything in year 3, the distinct minority. But yeah, it's possible.
And not only that, but for me, the archetype of player that Jameson Williams is not the type of player that I gravitate toward, because he is not a volume driver. He is a down the field kind of speed guy, but even his college tape, and I know that a lot of people loved his college tape and were, higher than I was on him because he has some highlights, and he does that. But like that was kind of my estimation of him was like if he's a wide receiver 2 or 3 on your fantasy team, and like every now and then he has a blow up week, like that's a win for what Jameson Williams is to me, and I think that is kind of what Frank is asking. Can he be that like guy who makes big plays?
Definitely.
He can, but that's not necessarily this really sporadic big play guy is not necessarily the type of player that I'm gonna roster hoping that happens.
It's one of the who's the next questions, right? Who's the next Deshaun Jackson? Because he was a guy who was sustainably viable in fantasy and kind of played like that. And so far, like all the other who's the next questions, there's not been a next one. It's like who's the next Devo? Who's the next? Rarely, it's just that guy is particularly talented. Kind of just enjoy him when they're here. Who's the next Christian McCaffrey? No, we got McCaffrey. Let's just enjoy that while we got it. Kind of a thing. Travis Kelce, Gronk, Graham. They're all played very differently. Jacob Callaway, welcome back. I think we've met before. Any stats that you see as more predictive than descriptive for running backs? Good question. Even worse answer, bad answer though. But yes, there are. Been hearing a lot about missed tackles forced per attempt. Yeah, I hear about that one lately. I also hear about, and that's running backs, obviously, first downs per target and stuff like first downs per reception is a big one, or just roping first downs and some level of efficiency of their volume. Yeah, they sound interesting. I haven't tested them specifically. I think where I've come to in my journey is to be aware, test when I get the data, look for the data and test, see how useful it can be. But broadly, if any, especially any single stat is being used to this can do this, it's wrong. Yeah, it can't. No, it's mostly sample size, sample trick, or anything else. Can it inform? Can it describe and predict to better and worse? Yes, absolutely. There's a ton. But when it's about predicting, it's about what are you predicting? Nothing in the NFL is that I know of is particularly predictive enough to get you with statistical certainty or statistical viability. Like nothing tests well in p-values, if you care, and probability that it actually has a connection. But yeah, and you don't have to pay for most of the ones that have similar predictive powers, like yards per team attempt, receiving yards per team attempt are good receiving stats, and you just need straight up team attempts and yards for that. So you don't have to go to yards per route run. But if you want to go behind a payroll, yards per route run is pretty much there. Sometimes it beats it, sometimes it's behind it. I prefer yards per team attempt or receiving yards per team attempt because it's simple and it makes sense to me rather than the route thing. And I don't think you get a particular edge on that. For running backs, it's a little harder, but the real answer is, this is always kind of the answer, it's just volume. How many times did they touch the ball? And if they don't play a lot, how many did they touch the ball per game or per round? That starts to matter, but most of it falls into a sample size problem. Yeah. Mostly you have to filter for players that played at least. In the NFL, Matt Spencer says it's, I forget his study, but he did a study on this. They have to play at least 8 games before their numbers are somewhat like what their season numbers would be if they had continued to play. It was the general idea. Not exactly, but fairly reliable. So if you filter to players with just 8 games or more, then you can start doing per game stuff. But that's mostly not where people use per game stuff, because we like per game numbers because it proves this player was, like, if this guy actually got 120 targets, he would have more receiving yards or rushing yards than anyone else in the world. That is probably telling you where the problem is there anyway. But yeah, if you're looking for running backs, you're looking for some level of measurement of how much volume they get, and PPR being what it is these days, and combining that in some fashion is good. In my college database I use. Sorry, Zach, this is boring as fuck for you. Adjusted yards per team attempt. Because again, you just need straight up numbers you can get anyway. You don't need me or anyone else to get team attempts and yards. Frick. People give them away for free like they're nothing all the time. So you don't need a paywall. And I like that. And it's simple. Yards per how many times a team rushed the ball. That's pretty cool. Makes sense to me. Let's go. And what I do is I double the receiving yards essentially because it's twice as important to rushing yards just from a PPR dynasty fantasy perspective. Not in the NFL. I'm not making any argument like that, but kind of. And that's it. You then just divide it by the number of times the team either throw or rush the ball. And it's pretty stable relative to other statistics for predictive power. Descriptive stats are a little more, believe it or not. You probably have to have a larger conversation. But yeah, there's plenty. I actually think one I come up across a lot with receiving, again, that's mostly where the statistical arguments end up, is route percentage, that's what I called it. Targets per route run is a popular one for people looking for a solver stat, which I don't think really possible. This is the answer. And if you combine it with yards per route run, because they tend to be a little more sophisticated, that's a really interesting idea. Targets per route run while looking at what players were doing and where they were playing is a lot more sophisticated and probably have better results than just trying to find a good stat. Too long didn't read. Points per game. There you go. That's a magic stat. It beats most things for predicting points next year, points next week, or points at any point in the future because you're testing points against points. That's just the way stats work. But also, it's going to hold true while doing even slightly more sophisticated analysis on building models or trying to make decisions in a fantasy team. What's their points per game if they played at least 8 games? That's probably as good as you can know about the future reasonably. Now, I'm not saying the statistical wizards we have these days don't have an edge on that, but I think the edge relative to just using points per game, if you just want a stat, is tiny. And they may be able to use it effectively if you consume their content and listen to their lives. They may be able to instruct you how. I don't think it's worth the squeeze, so I'm good. Okay, cool, got it.
To me, there's always a flavor of the year.
Yeah, that's all of these stats. This is a stat that solves it, which I don't think anything does.
And it's always working back. Like this year, we're working backwards. How could we have seen Puka Nacua coming?
Yeah,
and so we're working backwards, and they're like,
again.
Yeah, and so like I get it, I understand, and especially for somebody whose mind works rationally, like.
No, it's a rational thought. Absolutely.
Well,
don't get me wrong.
The people who work with numbers think if I plug in enough numbers, I can figure this out. And you just can't. And
there's validity to that. Don't get me wrong. I'm not a stats hater, to be clear. I haven't become a stats hater. I think the problem is most of us grinding away at stats are statisticians. We don't understand this shit. We're just trying to learn as we go. And that makes sense. The NFL, there is no sample of NFL games, plays, actions, or any particular thing that is anywhere close. Yeah. If we took the entire NFL, because players come in and go out so fast, that's just a whole other issue. The entire NFL, no stat can be predictive. They play now an extra game a year, but really it's 17, but really you can't count that last game because X, Y, and Z, and people want to take other games out. But even if you take all 17 all year, I think I read, oh God, I'm forgetting his name because I'm so out of date or out of connection now. But I read, had a great website where it would do questions that should be asked, but we're too busy trying to find more interesting answers, if you know what I mean. And he literally tested, how long do you have to rush the ball? How many times in a career before that is reasonably your yards per carry? Because that's one of the problems with yards per carry. It's not that it's stupid or anyone likes it. It's an idiot. It makes perfect sense. Yards per carry. I understand why that sounds and should work. But Frank Gore's entire career just about became stable as he finished it. That's how many times you have to rush the ball before. We've got one. We know one guy's yards per carry and nothing to compare it to is kind of my takeaway from the story.
And the game changes. like the
that's before
strategy
you get
of
to
the
the
game
game changing.
changes
Yeah.
every 8-10 years. Like we talked about this, Peter. One of the very first times that I ever came on to your podcast, way back, we talked about you can see kind of the arc, and you can see things change from the big stationary defenders having the nose tackle who can stop the run, having the linebackers who can deliver hits, having even bigger corners, and having that strong safety who can come up and just level somebody. And the shift becomes, okay, how do you combat that as the offense? Well, you get quicker, you get faster, you spread out the defense, and you make them cover in space because they're big players. And if you have smaller, fast players, you're going to have the advantage. And eventually the defense is like, okay, well, we can do this. We'll get smaller. And instead of a 2-3, instead of a 3-4, we'll run a 4-3, or we'll run a nickel, or we'll run a cover 2, and we'll shift, and we'll have, instead of that linebacker that hits, we'll now have like another corner or another safety in the game. And so now things get faster and quicker, and you cover, and the offense is like, well, how do I figure this out? Well, now we need to get bigger and be able to bully and push people around and do that. They started sliding the X receivers inside where they're being covered by smaller players, or players who aren't as fast. But like all of this stuff, it changes, which is to say, like, yeah, you may have a sample size, but it may not be of actually what is going on currently in the NFL, because if your sample size gets big enough, it's not the same game, even though it says the same, it's still got the same shirts, and your columns still sort by the same team names. So it's just such a tough thing to kind of stay ahead of. And so I think if you the more you can simplify things, I think the better we are, better off we are. When you said volume, it's
always better.
Yeah.
I was gonna say what pushed me over the edge, but that's not true. Everything, like so many things, pushed me over the edge. So, like, that's the only reason my content was at all interesting. I go over the edge a lot, but it's as more data came up. And to be clear, I use stats. I'm not saying stats are bunk. Just watch the tape. I literally don't watch. I think there's viability there. I think you just have to understand why the path is difficult, and therefore you find. I think I found path. Just some nobody, but. It's as more data became available, you got to look at stats like yards per route run and gap percentage and the questions start to come up like, okay, in this gap run, this guy faced these linebackers in this specific formation on this kind of weather, on this kind of day, when this guy was this level of health, and he was that level of health. And the more you think about it, the more you realize they're going to have to play this 1,000 times in the specific formation. We have a sample size of freaking anything that happened on this that this number is meant to represent, and that's for a layman like me. It took me a while to figure out that that's why the baseball stats work. They literally play infinitely, like the number of games they play. So you've got the same pitcher against the same hitter in the same field at the same time of year in the same level, relatively similar conditions. In the NFL, you just never get those similar conditions. The plays are a little more active. There's more players interacting at any one time. You just can't build a sample size and to that quick enough time frame that it's viable. That doesn't mean they're junk and statistics don't work. No, I think to Jacob's point, there's plenty of description going on with all stats are all interesting, and if you combine it with tape, people find utility in them there. What I'd say is a more stats grindy than an NFL grindy is you've got to let go of the idea of threshold. Instead of a guy has to, that's first. Instead of a guy has to hit X number or above or around that number, even it's what do all the stats look like in this type of situation that I'm looking at? What type of profile am I looking for? And that's why I think the targets per out run arguments are often more sophisticated, but I still run up, like I had that whole argument about Christian Watson and his injury means that basically we still don't know. But if you look at the context of when players earn more volume, what types of indicators, not what's the specific number, but do their targets per route run, are they extremely high usually before they get more volume? Well, not really. They typically earn volume at a reasonable rate, but it's pretty high. And then they go into their second year, which is pretty much when all volume increases happen. And they expand on that role they already built in year one. It's not like their targets per route run indicate that the team should be using them more. It's just that most players who evolve into a higher role had a higher than expected role already, and they just continue with that into year two. Like you would expect from just a common sense perspective, if you join the NFL, you're learning the game, you're getting better, you're picking up your teammates' signals, you're practicing all that stuff they do. And then in year two, you're better at all of that, and you did pretty well. And so that continues to grow. That's actually what the profile looks like in a narrative sense. Whereas trying to look for a per route, per target kind of efficiency that indicates, oh, and then it expanded. No, it actually looks like a natural growth into higher targets, like in the vast majority of cases. It's not from nowhere targets, as it were. It does happen, but the smaller number, it's Nico Khan, so the smaller number of cases, and they're really hard to predict just for that alone because they don't happen a lot. And there's nothing really that ties them together. Again, finding the next Puka Nacua, like my whole argument against him leading up was every player with that profile, not specific numbers, but that type of way of playing in college has failed. Could it happen? I literally said, and I always do, yeah, for sure. I'm not saying we shouldn't draft him at any cost. He's a decent player, and a lot of people watching the tape seem to think he has skills that are elevate. Would be fools to ignore that because tape has that. Even if, like Zach, you watched the tape and didn't find him that interesting, there were a lot of known good tape players who believed that. But the general sense of how he earned his yards and points in college looks like it would be 100% failure rate for every other player that played that, looking at targets per out run, looking at yards per out run, or actual stats that you don't have to sound like a goofy fad follower to use, like yards per team attempt or receiving yards per team attempt. They just have all failed. Still can happen, but it seems like we should have some hesitation. And then he did what he did year one. You're like, okay. And to ask, what do we need to know to follow him makes no sense to the way I've learned to work with stats, because everyone who had anything like his profile have failed, even with draft capital before now. And so the idea, oh, now one's happened, the next guy with that profile will hit, becomes ludicrous. Because I think about stats in a certain way, I guess. I'm not saying I'm even right. Maybe the literal next guy that looks like Puka Nacua's profile will hit, because variance happens. And that's where nerds sound like they're trying to obfuscate and come up with ways that are always right. No, I'm literally saying I was definitely wrong here. If it happens again, I'll be definitely wrong again, because I don't think this indicates that there's something in his profile that suggested he was different than any of those guys. He just was. We should probably just appreciate that, actually. You know, it's like looking for the next Alvin Kamara. We can actually just really value the fact that Alvin Kamara exists, and this is how he worked his way into being one of the best at a very difficult job. Anyway, I'm blathering, but I do think that's a better way of thinking and using stats. I don't think they're not viable. I don't think they're lies. I think you have to let go of certain things, especially for a layman like myself. You guys might have degrees in it. I do not. And so I have to find a path that kind of accounts for all of that. Don't look at thresholds. Get a sense of what most players do with multiple ways of fairly defining how a player created what they did the year before or the year they broke out, and then go looking for those similar things. It happened to me today. This is a better way of looking at it. And I woke up, turned on Twitter way too early in the morning, because that's my life now, and I saw Jake Estes, cool guy, talked to him on Twitter before, talking about Frank Gore Jr. and how he dominated in college or something, which again is just kind of vocabulary I don't use anymore. And Jake said, I'd be shocked if Frank Gore Jr. clears waivers. He crushed at every level. And then mentioned they got 4,000 rushing yards, and the numbers look good. And so I went to my database and was like, why don't I like Frank Gore Jr. that much? And I said he did 4,000 yards on over 700 team attempts, which looks fine. I'm not saying it, and that proves he actually has a bad per attempt. It looks fine. It's in the range of the average. For example, the max adjusted yards per team attempt of top 12 players, like the guys we're hoping to draft, was around 2.4, and Frank's was around 2.2, if memory serves. Again, it's not that significant. It's just, okay, that's all right, but it's on a lot more team attempts than most do it for, and you can see that by the fact he played 4 years, missed very few games. And if you can look at the total of the top 12 list, the best running backs we draft is around 1.7 on average. Again, the average is kind of sucky in itself, but just to get a sense, it's about 1.7, and his one was 1.9, which again is in range. That's good. And if we were threshold seekers, we would say, therefore, Frank Gore is good. But those two numbers come off the back of a very, very different profile. Like all of those guys maxing out at 2.4, which is not a single season or a partial season, or only played 2 years before they went to the NFL. They're doing it a lot quicker and with a lot more impact. And it's not that he only ground his way up. Frank Gore seems to be pretty capable, but he didn't spark a joy or some other phrase in the offense. He's not having the same impact to create those numbers. And that's a different profile. It's fine, and it's not that it's outside the range of the threshold, but it's a little less impressive when you take into account the way he produced those numbers. You're like, okay, he was definitely capable in college. No, I would never say that. But did he spark comparison to the running backs you're mostly thinking of when you think he's going to crush? No, not really, even if the numbers look slightly similar, because the whole of his profile looks distinctly different. It looks fine. I think he could be very capable for an NFL team. I'm hoping he is. I'm rooting for all of these guys. But he doesn't make a historical comparison to the running backs I'm actually chasing, especially not a Kamara or one that took a more unusual path, especially not one that cleared waivers in order to find a team that was going to play him in an active game. When you start taking into those things into account, you'll find a few. I'm sure Raheem Mostert wouldn't look too dissimilar. But it gives you a better idea, again, of who you're chasing. Maybe a Raheem Mostert, maybe a couple of years with the right team. And then you talk to Zach and you're like, how good is he actually compared to someone like Mostert? And he's like, whatever he's about to say. Anyway, that's an example of my blathering from earlier. It's just taking into account everything, or as much as I can, that I think is reasonable. Instead of looking for a number go green or number go red, I don't think it's the right way that someone like me can use them. Put it that way. Yeah. I've missed a lot of comments talking about this, Zach. I've been blathering for a minute. Anything you would like to add? Is Frank Gore Jr. actually dominant and great? Can you not hear me or see me?
Now I can. You were freezing. No, you're the numbers guy. Like let's roll off. I think you hit that pretty well.
Okay. Hey, Zach. I found it. My computer was trying to back up everything all of a sudden. So I stopped.
Perfect.
Some nude. Good evening, hat tip. What aspects of your favorite Dynasty League make them your favorite, and how did you find those leagues? The quality of a league makes trump any settings. I agree. And that's actually the answer. How do we find them? Zach, why don't you take that one? I've been talking for way too long, and we have the exact same opinion on this.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is the league mates, and I still advocate Twitter. I think that there is a really good fantasy football dynasty, especially community, and also now if you can get yourself into the trade addicts. So Russ, Dynasty Outhouse, and Rocky Petrella do the trade addicts leagues. If you can get yourself into the trade addicts Discord, they have a really great group there, and also are always doing like have like a league joining chat. They have a general chat. They're just it's really nice because Russ and Rocky do a pretty good job of kind of narrowing down that player pool, that the people in your league for you, to people who are like-minded, where they're just degenerate in fantasy football. They love to trade because they're in trade addicts leagues or listen to the trade addicts pod, and they're just, as a general rule, like decent humans. And so you can kind of get a feel for the people in the group. If you're, and the same thing with like DLF does the forums. You just get in, start talking to people, figure out who you hit it off with, and when you end up with 12, set up some really good bylaws. I advocate for that. I think that's something that sometimes gets missed because it's a lot of fun to start a league, and it's not a lot of fun to dig through everything that actually makes the league. But if you do that diligence, and even if you go to
Hey, it's the
somebody who's a what?
Hey Zach. Yeah, sorry, my internet cut out again. Yeah, I was gonna say the other secret answer outside of finding people, because I know that can feel like you're on the outside tapping in. Like, where do I find them? It just takes time, unfortunately. Stalk good commissioners, because they tend to group around them pretty fun, or at least good people to play with, for the same reasons. They know how to handle a problem. They recognize a situation for what it is. It's actually a skill that's a little undervalued. And so I'm pretty much not in a league that's not run by Russ or John Bosch at this point, because I just know them to be the best commissioners I've ever seen. Don't tell them. I don't want to compliment them, because I intentionally try to drive them mad. But again, I know that's not a great answer, but that's what I go looking for. Play in as many leagues as you can. You meet people, you bump into people, you make online friends, as it were. And if they suck, move on. Who cares? You don't suck, they suck, move on. And never be afraid to do that. But eventually you start bumping into people that you're like-minded with. Like me and Zach get along pretty well. We get along pretty well with Dynasty Outhouse. And you end up bumping into these people, and when you find one that's a good commissioner, they know and they understand what a bylaw is, they know how to implement them, and they're definitely not scared to follow the rules in the moment that they need to be followed. That's a John Bosch special. When most people were like, it seems a little unfair, John Bosch just slaps you with it because that's the rule. We can change the rules in the off season if you want, but that is the rule right now. That's the way it's going to play out. And it's not actually easy, especially to organize all of that stuff if you're running multiple leagues. So that's the other, if it helps, look for a good commissioner. You'll eventually bump into a league that you just feel is ran a little differently. And yeah, find out who that commissioner is and try and follow them around a bit. That's always been my other way of finding good leagues. The people make it, but good people tend to follow good commissioners, because we figure out at some point, like, you need one. You need one to really make it when there is that random idiot trying to make the league not fun for everyone else. A good commissioner handles it well. Even in that extreme situation, they will be better at it than me and most. And so that's the other secret kind of. It is who's in it, but it's also who's running it a little bit. It's why the Scott Fishbowl is good. It's run by an excellent, at the heart of it, an excellent commissioner. What you want about Scott Fish, like we all have our gripes, but he's an excellent commissioner. Like he's hands down really good at that. And that's why the Scott Fishbowl works. What are some outside the bit foster more attractiveness and activity in our leagues? Trades beget more trades. Do small trades has been one way. I don't have to actually have Matt Price on my podcast try and figure out how league movers do it. And he explained everything he tries, but it's very, I come up with an idea. Dynasty Outhouse does a Dynasty Outhouse challenge, and they all have these ideas. But the simple answer is, I think some people are league movers. Like they just incite activity. So find those guys too. I know it sucks, but it is. Like I've watched Matt Price do it in one of my leagues, and I still don't understand how I can do things more like Matt Price. He's just a very active owner, like I am too, but he comes up with an idea. He communicates with people. He's very easy to communicate with and fun to talk with, and I think that's a big part of it. I am not. And he incites you. Like the minute Matt Price joins the league, you'll notice that your activity starts going up because he's got ideas and he wants to execute them. So he's sending out offers, he's sending out comments and queries, and he's not constantly, don't get me wrong, but he does it so effectively that you end up seeing your league activity just tick up. So outside of finding one or two, it's trying to become one or two, I guess. And it is that. Just have an idea, a thing you want to do in your league. Be easy to deal with, easy to communicate with. You can say no to anything, but you're not trying to put anyone off when you say that. And Dynasty Outhouse does it by being overtly nice, like hostilely nice. Like that guy, seriously, is too nice. And Matt Price does it by being very reasonable and again, a good guy to talk to. That's what I know. You can ask them, and like I have, you can listen to that podcast, follow Matt Price, follow Dynasty Outhouse. But all the advice they give sounds great. Most of it, I don't find a similar result when I try it, like sending out offers, like trying small trades, trying something like the Dynasty Outhouse Challenge. Matt Price will walk into a chat and say, I am trading this guy on this date, send your best offers. And if I do that, no real offers come in. Matt Price does it, there's a bidding war on Frank Gore Jr. or whatever, and you end up trading them for a fourth, because who cares? But it was activity and it was fun. But you could try things like that. Zach, please talk, because I think I'm not sure exactly how much of my content is hitting the internet at this point.
I like, and this is a really small thing in terms of, it doesn't sound like it would affect trades, but in my home league, we have an unlimited taxi squad for players that you draft for their first 2 years, which all of a sudden makes trading for third, fourth, fifth round rookie picks valuable, because you can have an infinite number of those players, which means that, say you trade for the entire fourth round of a rookie draft, you can set those players on your taxi squad for 2 years. So chances are one of those players becomes at least something viable. And so again, taking those shots in the late rounds,
interesting.
Where normally I wouldn't even think about third, fourth, fifth, even seconds. I wouldn't even think about them, with the ability to let them marinate a little bit and not take up a roster spot and not have to be cut and go back onto it definitely changes your waiver wire a little bit. But that to me is a really fun, small way to be able to get some trades going, and some smaller trades. And Peter, you said it before, like once trades happen, it's muscle memory, it's learned behavior. Once a league starts seeing trades happen, they're like, oh, I can do this too. And it just kind of cascades. And so that's one thing that's a little out of the box that is fun, at least in the league that I play in here. It gives us a little bit more of those back end pick trades.
That's a structural way of making things have to happen as well.
Yeah.
Like eventually you're going to want to make a waiver wire pickup at some point, even if you're not very active waiver wire, but now you have to work out a deal, even if it's something small. Yeah, it's a good idea. And so running backs, are you looking more weighted opportunities? I think weighted opportunity rating is a pretty good one. Yeah, literally the stat that rolls that in. Scott Barrett, I believe, coined that. I think that's his stat, as it were, and I try and calculate a version of that as best I can. Yeah, weighted opportunity is great, and something that's measuring volume and how valuable it is going to accurately compare volume to volume instead of just rushing yards and rushing targets. But again, that's understanding what is good about a stat and trying to find an edge to it. And again, I still wouldn't think thresholds. I would still think you need more context around that in terms of probably the success of the team, taking into account the broader situation and how likely that is to repeat. But weighted opportunity is fantastic for running backs. Yeah, that's a good one. Thanks. I didn't even think of that. Good evening, gentlemen and ladies. Catching up in the beginning, and I can say that you sound equally as handsome at 2 times speed. Well, thank you, Mr. Sanders.
It's not saying much.
Which is to say not very, but okay. Jacob Calloway, how do you determine a guy having a good first few games versus a real breakout? It's a really interesting question. There's no exact answer, obviously. Again, nothing I say is exact. It's a problem. Players actually... Again, if you're looking at the majority, and here we have to stop saying vast majority, but the majority of players who are actually going to go on to have good seasons actually establish something like it earlier than you'd think. My targets share series for DLF tried to kind of pin down a range for the different positions last year and looking at historical data, but really using rookies as they unfolded. So I knew I wasn't just, again, like Zach said, looking at last year and just saying that's the pattern. But trying to be a little predictive as we learn, and we didn't get very predictive, but we did pretty good. And there are some players who kick off towards the end of the season. It's actually a feature of rookies, again, easing into the NFL, and a lot of rookies go off in the second half. That's why they can be very interesting targets in best ball leagues and stuff, because as other teams are getting weaker, a certain group of players actually increase, and that's rookies, if they're hitting. But if we're going to look at a majority, not a vast majority, most are establishing themselves. I think, I can't remember, I have to go back and read my own stuff. But like week 5, week 6, you have a pretty good idea of those who are establishing roles that are fantasy viable and interesting, like for sure, at most. Running backs, it's a little bit more tenuous because you've got, how is that opportunity earned? Is it through an injury? And that can happen with running backs. But I would still say most good running backs, like with the yearly trend, are showing up even quicker than wide receivers, like the first 3-4 games for sure. But by game 7 in the rookie season, injury is a slight excuse. We've got Michael Pittman, who missed a lot of time his rookie season, and he's the one that I know of who eventually did go on to establish a higher role. Not many do, but injury can now be an excuse to some extent. Jameson Williams, truthers. But yeah, by game 7, you should definitely have seen something that looks like establishing themselves as something they should be fairly viable in fantasy. If you're looking at yearly totals, it becomes like 600 to 700 receiving. Again, not thinking thresholds, but just giving you a rough idea. 600 to 700 receiving yards, 17% target share-ish. And depending on what stat you want to use. But the yearly thing isn't telling you that per game story. And again, by game 7, honestly, most rookies, and a majority, but a slight majority, have done something, who are going to do something. But that's still a little newish to me. I haven't really put my shoulder behind those trends. The yearly trends are a little more certain. Weekly is a little rough, again, smaller time frame. No one can tell you what you're going to be tomorrow, and no one can tell what an NFL player is going to be next week for sure. But I think, yeah, it's better to go a little harder on the early than leaving it till late. But then again, you always have an eco,
I'm always of the opinion that if they're doing something good, you want to be in on them quicker. And if they're not performing the way you expect, give a little bit more leeway. It doesn't cost you anything. I mean, it does, but it doesn't cost you as much to cut them as it does to miss somebody who becomes, Austin Eckler.
That's kind of that's what that kind of lent me to. Like the players who develop later, if you get out too early, you might burn a little value there. For example, Tyreek Hill, like you burn a bunch of it. I know I did it. When the minute he started to do something pretty decent and people were interested, I was like, okay, trade. So instead of reverse that a bit, like Zach said, if they're doing something a little interesting, you get more interested. And if they're not, it's better to get out now than wait and see. And I know that's counterintuitive, especially the Dynasty. We've been saying people give up on players too quickly forever. Actually, we haven't. We've been dragging our feet slightly because it turns out, and I know this is a crazy revelation, so maybe like bring everyone in. This is when I get famous. Like get the community in here. We're just fans of football players. And we're always kind of rooting for them to hit. If not this year, it's next year. If not this week, it's next week. And so our inclination is actually to wait a little too long, even when we're being actually the ADP and the 10,000 foot view has corrected for this a lot of the last 7 years. I've been tracking DLF ADP. We're a lot more aggressive in devaluing players, where players are more likely to stay stable or raise if they do a little something interesting. JSN's a good example of that. So is Bryce Young. His value's dropped, but we didn't tank it, CJ Stroud, we all got a lot more aggressive, maybe even a little too aggressive, but it's still fair. It's fine. That's kind of the right direction to go. Again, on average, we're correcting effectively. But as individuals, our inclination is to believe, and I do too, I just happen to know it's wrong, that people give up too soon. Actually, there's probably a little more value in giving up a little earlier. And getting that wrong sometimes is going to burn you less than holding on more often. Nikhil Harry, Corey Davis, those kind of things. I'm not crying, you're crying. Are stats more useful for looking at college guys for establishing hit rates? From my perspective, yeah, I find my college database a little more not attractive, but I definitely want to get that work done for my own leagues because I literally don't know anything about these players. Whereas, vibes are a thing, and I think it's actually honestly fine to play on because so are coaches and so are teams. Like I know T. Higgins has done some pretty cool stuff. I know he's not been a top 12 player, he's not been a Jamar Chase, but he's been a really good guy with Jamar Chase, and that's enough. I don't have to remember his exact points per game. You can do a lot with just having a general sense of who's good, who's bad in the NFL, and remembering it actually is a real trick. Like Jalen Waddle, when was he last time in the top 12? If he ever gets back to the top 12, that's going to come up. People are going to call it a breakout. I'm going to say it's not, and they're going to say, when was he ever in the top 12? And I will say he's literally his first year. It happened with Cooper Kupp. He got back in the top 5 a couple of years ago. You might remember that really good season. His value jumped off the charts, and everyone was like, oh my God, who could have seen this from Cooper Kupp? And it was literally Zach walking around going, didn't this happen before? It's like, yes, it literally happened before. People just forget. So remembering it becomes the actual issue because vibes can backfire. And with college, I think we know less. I think we definitely know less about, I think the best know less about who and how anyone is going to elevate. Because honestly, a large part of it, not just statistics, is these are people. People can surprise, thankfully. And so I think chasing the college statistics is a little more viable for finding an edge in Dynasty because everyone doesn't know. Whereas and there's less to go on, just as a general dynasty. Even a grinder who turns up to a stream like this, you probably rely on vibes a little bit sometimes because we have lives. And so the college stats I actually find a little more not important, but you know what I mean? And those are the ones I chase a little harder. I'll make sure I get locked in before I move forward. Yes, I have Carson Steele stash everywhere. Great, it's a pretty good stash in those later rounds, and his value's already been interesting. You know, Jamie Thresh is your 5th-year round alpha guys. Be prepared. I actually liked him a little bit. He's just too deep. Roster cloggers are normally wide receivers, so I don't tend to grab a lot of them, even if I'm a little high ranked on them compared to others. Work leagues love sneaking first and second PPR, 1-2 PPR. What positions or players to smack them? What am I missing?
Work league.
I don't understand this one.
Love sneaky. What? I don't know.
Half PPR. Okay.
One save.
Oh, okay. So you're asking for someone that's higher valued in half-point PPR that most people might not talk about because we're all tend to refer to PPR, I think. I don't know. There are a few names, I think. Like they're better in half-point than you would think. There's touchdown scorers mostly, obviously. Or guys that get such excessive volume that they're still viable.
Even I would say even half PPR are the guys who catch passes. In terms of running backs,
yeah.
like that's always kind of the. To me, it's the running backs.
Someone like Kittle at tight end might be more interesting.
Yeah, the fewer points
to catch.
Yeah, the fewer points per reception. I think you're right with Kittle. Right now, we just had a question asked earlier about Kyren Williams and if we're panicking on Kyren Williams because he's returning punts, and if the collective community right now is panicking on Kyren Williams because they said he's going to return punts, that's a guy that I would go after. It's that type of. It's still going to be the running backs are still going to be pass catching running backs. So you're still going to be after McCaffrey and Kyren Williams and Kamara and ETN and like that's what you're doing. Breece Hall, Bijan, like that's what you're doing. So I mean I don't know. Like James Conner James Conner is a sneaky one in terms of if you're trying to win a league, not necessarily like. He's not great for Dynasty long term, but like if you're trying to win a league, that's not a bad one.
I think that's all I got. One save every draft pick league and so all picks league for Dynasty. If one of the two teams starts sucking, when do I sell for first? Don't do yourself first, but it is a good currency to think of in Dynasty. I would agree. I'm trying not to be a pick chaser when building, but yeah, it tends to be where I run to. Assuming trade deadline 4 seasons end, what week? Oh, that's a good question. Like, when do you start recognizing that you're not as competitive as you might like to be? Again, I think aggressive is better, especially in a league that has a turnover, so not full Dynasty or even a keeper league. Tends to be better rather than earlier. I think you and J-Mag went through this on your podcast. I think I'm trying to get a pretty good idea of it by week 3, but by week 5, I'm either panicking or not. If you know what I mean, that tends to be where my rough categories are. Again, it's not that you can't make trades and turn it around. Daddy's home, Mike. Has great stories of rejuvenating a team in season. Like, that's always an option. It might be one you want to keep in your back pocket. Making active moves can work. But knowing that you have to make active moves, I think you should be, or not, quick on. I think by week 3, you should start to reassess. By week 5, you should have a pretty good idea of the direction you're going. Yeah. Especially with a league with a trade deadline. Yeah. Try and do it earlier rather than later. Zach, I really can't remember if that was different or too different from what you. You're an early fan, but I think you had better thresholds.
So it was, and I went back 10 years. So it was by week 3, you knew half of the players who were going to be top 12 at their position already. And by week 4, you're up to 60% of the players who are already top 12 are going to finish top 12. And so, like, if you break up the season into 4-week sections, that first, that week 3, week 4 is where I'm starting to make decisions. And you make decisions early, because if you wait, there are going to be other teams making decisions too, and then all of a sudden there becomes a market, and there's competition, and you have to pay more, or you don't get as much. So because the market's saturated. So by week 3, week 4 is where I am starting to reevaluate my team and make that move. And like J Mike and I did.
I think that's a good extra point there. It's my bad. The longer you wait, the smaller your audience gets, because more people are getting more worried about their teams. Whereas earlier, you have more people who might be more interested in making competing moves, whereas you're trying to make building moves. So yeah, sorry, I wanted to emphasize that one.
Yeah, I mean, that's.
I am frozen, Genji. Yeah, that was my bad. Still is. Looking at redraft rankings and redraft boards, it's looking like a funky year. Yeah, right. Not so much with crazy predictions, but just teams being wonky based on ADP. Spreadsheet guys and counter hot take guys will both be left in the dust this year. Agree or disagree? I actually think when I look at ADP, I think the market's expecting reasonable things based on where the NFL should be. That's what I came away with doing my breakout series. We're in on young wide receivers. When are we not? But it's actually a pretty good year to be expecting young wide receivers to make some headway. And we're in on breakout tight ends, because the tight ends have been so interesting lately. It's a pretty good year to expect that. Again, I'm not going to go over all of it, but yeah, I actually think the market's expecting fairly reasonable things, and that to me does look funky. Like it's a broken watch being right once every 7 years. It's not that it won't get a lot wrong, but I don't see too many things from my way of playing that are, hey, everyone's expecting something crazy, I'm going to go the other way. And that to me feels funky. It's like I'm in line with so much this year. Like no one's fooled by this running back class, but we have some hope, and so they're all reasonable, and that sucks. Zach, do you have anything that looks extra funky this year?
What, for shirts or hot takes?
No, where people are like the wide receivers are a little overvalued. That's the thing I would say. But,
yeah, well, I mean, but they're gonna be overvalued, because we're in that cycle where there haven't been very many good running backs, and so right now everybody, or a lot of people, are looking at zero RB as being the way to go, and so when everybody does that, you do the opposite. Like, so yes, like they are being overvalued, but it's because of the I think it's also because of the misunderstanding of having a lot of good wide receivers. If this section is all the same, then it doesn't matter if you take them, in the 3rd round, or if you take them in the 10th round. If there's no difference, if those 30 players are all scoring between 12 and 13 points, that's not a difference maker. So I think, again, it's more about trying to find the players who give you advantages, and oftentimes that's not hot takes. Oftentimes that's not, where the general consensus is, because I think we tend to be slow and maybe a little conservative. So.
Yeah, I think I'm both agreeing and disagreeing, James. Like, I think you're right, but at the same time, anyone who takes a strong reach or a counter strike, if it hits, it's going to be perhaps more significant because I think there are enemies many reaches to be made that do hit. If that makes sense. Like if you just outdraft Brandon Ayuk this year in the third round and he hits like everyone always hoped he could, that's going to be one of very few guys that actually beat their ADP that significantly. I don't think that's going to happen, but yeah, as an example. And so that might be more significant because there are so few hits lower. But I think running backs can actually provide that for most of us. But yeah. My favorite Scott Fishbowl 14 shirt, Bob. I've got Blue Barbie, Mighty Ducks, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Those are all solid.
There are so many good shirts. So many good shirts this year.
Too many. I only have so much money. That's the only problem.
Yeah, I'm top 5 right now of spending money on T-shirts, which is not good. I shouldn't be there.
Desmond Ritter dropped and Zappy. Does roster cut limit season let a badly managed NFL team get some talent on their roster unfairly? Is it the same in Dynasty Fantasy? No. The NFL kind of flocks together. They like the smell of their own farts. It's why I think some significant talents, even drafted in the first round, even if they struggled, never hit. It's because once you got that failed first round on you, it's hard to hit later. The more draft capital you have, the earlier you should hit, and the less likely you are to hit any time if you haven't already. There's this inverse relationship where the lower drafted people start becoming more likely to hit by second and third year if no one's done anything, because there was more expectation on those higher drafted players, and the NFL kind of flocks together. If you fail, you fail. Even if, like we've seen with Geno Smith and some others very recently, there was something there, but it's very rare. I think we've lost a lot of players that way with the immediacy of the NFL and the fact the NFL kind of follows the same beat. Fantasy, everyone's trying to beat counter-strikey, to use your own terms, so maybe less so. And there's always someone looking to pick up Laquan Treadwell when I drop him after 3 games. And sometimes that will work out. But yeah, largely the same thing. We group think a lot, to use Zach's common phrase. So yeah. Richard Davis, talk about this about a month ago. Just wanted to see if your thoughts are different, but traded Jefferson for London and a 25 first and a 26 first, 10-team best ball, superflex, PPR, tight end premium. Thoughts? Last time said it was fine, by the way. Jefferson for London and 2 first. We said it was fine, did we? It's fine, but I don't like it. I don't know if that's an update. I don't think I would do this. If you're pure building, I could see it, and the value's there because that's slightly more than 3 firsts, which is around about as much as any player should cost. And like, it would have to be a hell of a build for me to not think I would rather keep Jefferson. I'd have to be pure building. Yeah, that's where I'm at now. I hope it's something similar to what I said a month ago. Zach? Jefferson for London and 2 firsts.
Yeah, same thing. It's generally I want to consolidate up into the Jefferson. If I ended up with London, I think he's a player that I am willing to move because I think there's a pretty big like hype surge on him. And
that's maybe the thing I would add. If you get London, trade him. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and it's not necessarily like you don't necessarily have to do it now because it may be a bigger hype surge. He plays well. And look, it's not out of the realm of possibility that all of a sudden he does the Nico Collins thing where like he has a great year and you're really happy with that. But
actually maybe more expected, but
yeah. And I know what Jefferson is, and that's the guy that I prefer. But it's not like it. You didn't get hosed on the trade.
I don't think London is ever going to be Jefferson, and the chances are you're not going to draft a Jefferson with 2 firsts. The value of that could probably do a lot for a building team, which is where I came out of it. Yeah, that's about as much as I can say. And yeah, Zach's right. If you have London, look into trading London. If Neighbors gets a Giants treatment and he plays like JSN, what would you trade him for week 5? If he's the thing with JSN, he wasn't disappointing enough for me to ever sell, but he wasn't positive enough for me to ever buy. I'm fence sitting. Zach's still a little more positive because he's not an idiot like me. And I think the edge is in going in, but I've been burnt too many times on wide receivers, and so I'm fence sitting. I don't think his rookie year was disappointing. If Neighbors has a JSN like rookie year, I think we're fine. But yeah, week 5 will be early enough to sell JSN or Neighbors where the value that you just spent or he has right now is still available, and you don't have to sit and wait like we are with JSN. And so it'd still be a pretty good time. Yeah, week 5, fine to go shopping, but you need the value of him right now to get back if he's having as disappointing a season. That correct me. That was mostly negative on our guy.
No, I'm still of the opinion where I'm betting on talent. I'm still betting on JSN. I think he's a good player. I think you're going to see a lot more this year than you did last year, and the same with Neighbors in a bad situation. I think he's a good player. I will be surprised if Neighbors doesn't draw 25+% of the targets in the Giants offense. So like the offense being bad doesn't mean that he is bad.
Yeah. Sounds like JSN. He's a stinker. Genji said it, not me. Don't. Richard, nothing has changed. Bad trade then. It's a bad trade now. Genji, just harsh every time. So I'm guessing I should sell Burton for a singular second since you guys skipped the question. Did I? Sorry. Burton for a second is a fine trade. Like Zach says, we're getting into point season now. So, I did. You might want to write it out. I tend not to sell. If I draft a rookie, I want to see what turns out unless the value escalates wildly. And the third to a second, you should, value-wise. But if your team's fine and doesn't desperately need to build, again, pure building, maybe. If not, I kind of like seeing what the season brings. And so I tend to turn those micro value increases down.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think. I mean, it's kind of a lateral move at this point. So I don't mind it, but whatever. I guess I'd probably rather bet on I can get something as a second next year than better than what I did with Burton this year. Although I don't dislike Burton. But
give Dak and Ferguson, get Kittle in the mid-second. It's a 1 QB league. It didn't make sense to me either. And yeah, I'd rather have Kittle, but it sucks to sell Dak for a second. But in a 1 QB, it's probably about it. Yeah, Kittle, please.
I nod. Yes.
Thoughts on Dallas Cowboy running back situation? It's Zeke time, baby. No, I don't think there's a running back you desperately want to own in Dallas, which just emphasizes the passing game a little bit more in terms of fantasy. I think maybe.
I do think that it is like they're going to run Zeke into the ground until he can't run anymore. Like I don't think Rico Dowdle's very good, and I don't think Dalvin Cook is anything, even though he was lifting weights the other day before he got signed. Like,
good for him. Stay healthy.
Yeah.
Decent. Richard Davis, hoping to trade London for 2 firsts. That'd be great. Again, you're churning that trade. That makes sense. We for sure didn't say it was fine. You can trade London for AJ Brown somehow. That'd be great. You see, now you're starting to see how the trade could turn into something that you actually like. Because London is young and the season's about to start. He's going to be the best thing ever for someone. And if someone in a league feels that way, they would get rid of that codger AJ Brown or DK Metcalf or what or. And suddenly you're building something. I saw JSN already. Tell me how many studs average less than 9 points per game on 17 games. Again, it's not really the threshold with me. His overall profile looks borderline fine, but yeah, I am leaning. If you can get back anything like what you paid in, we're kind of there. But I do like Zach's point about the talent. I did see it in his profile. That's why I'm kind of fence-sitting. I never found a strong get-out window. And I definitely haven't found a strong get-in window, I'm afraid. So JSN for Corey Coleman. His bubble could rise on anything because he's been so fun in the media already. If he has a good game or a touchdown I could see that happening in a second. JSN Coleman and a second for Higgins and Cam Walker. I think that's solid. I think that's very solid. Yeah. Started to feel the hype for football with the work league, but it's been a slow start. Are you both feeling fantasy season or not? I keep forgetting how close we are. I got to do a whole data collection thing and write an article series, which I've kind of been dreading how it's going to fit into my schedule. I keep forgetting I have to get ready for that. I was reformatting my weekly database yesterday because I was like, shit, I need to remember how to do all of this. I have to simplify this and get these 2 sheets that are very easy to transfer and everyone to use and not too complicated. And it comes in waves. Every now and again I remember, I'm like, shit. And the rest of the time I'm just head in the clouds, I'm going to do another Dynasty Grind and talk about a thing that's not going to happen yet. Honestly, yeah. Zach, do you feel like it's here? You've just done your camping trip. It feels like you're gearing up. You might be more in the.
No, but honestly, the in-season stuff for me is whatever. The fantasy season is fine, it's fun, but all of the work that I do is either headed up into the rookie draft or leading the preseason up to the regular season. I barely do any content during the season. I don't write for anybody. If I feel like I need to do a Dynasty Dummies episode, I do a Dynasty Dummies episode. But if I don't have anything that to contribute that is earth shattering that I need to get out that I think people will benefit from, I don't. I enjoy watching the games. I enjoy playing fantasy football, but it's not something now that.
It's not as all-consuming as it used to be.
I don't ramp up. I don't ramp up for it. I ramp up for rookie season. So my fantasy football content starts in November, and I'm still a ways from there. 87 days from when I would start ramping up.
Is Dynasty Best Ball a thing you'll do? Yeah, I actually one of my 5 leagues is a Dynasty Best Ball league. I enjoy it greatly, actually. I really like the benefit of not having to worry on a weekly basis, although you still do about other things, but not having to worry about the starting lineup. I think it's pretty cool, actually. I actually like the Dynasty Best Ball format. Name 3 rookie wide receivers that will bust from this past rookie draft. This year's, I'm guessing. Any round. Well, it's kind of too easy. We get so few hits. It's harder to name where she said definitely hit. Where's my static one? There it is. I think I can open this without crashing the whole thing. I'm gonna go as high as I can in the old ADP in the old draft capital, to use your phrase. Where is it? Draft gear? No.
I mean, the real easy ones for me, like off the rip, I don't think Pearsall is going to be what everyone thinks as a round one player,
Yeah,
even in
that's
San Francisco. AD Mitchell, I'm not necessarily. And I know he's had 2 really spectacular one-handed catches in the preseason, but he feels like he's maybe not quite. And then, like, look, I've been lower on Xavier Legette and Keon Coleman than a lot of people. And whether or not that comes to fruition, I don't know. But
yeah, it's actually really easy this year. Hang on. So I got the same Pearsall and Leggett from the first round. Yeah, don't believe it. I still don't believe in Keon Coleman, Jalen Polk in the second round. Adonai Mitchell for sure. I'm out. I am more out than most. I'm not out. Like I think he could be solid. But Lad McConkey is the one where I maybe differ on a few very smart people, and I don't know how I feel about it because his value is reasonable. But like, I don't see the next Keenan Allen. Put it that way.
no, but he could
Tyler
do the
Boyd, maybe.
yeah, but he could do like the 2 seasons of Tyler Boyd where everyone got excited and his value went up. Like
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
because I don't like. I think he is a slightly above average wide receiver on a very below average wide receiving team. Like the team has very poor wide receivers. So, the old volume goes to the best players. He by default, it's like it's not pretty, but I think he's the best receiver on that team, or has a chance to be the best receiver on that team.
Yeah, the highest first 3 I can name again: Pearsall, Leggett, which we agree on Coleman. The guy, if I only had to pick one, my low scoring guy is Xavier Leggett. Like I don't believe it out of those 3. I mean, I'm still rooting for him, believe it or not. More fantasy viable players would be great. I definitely don't want him not to be a thing, to be clear. Thoughts on Pitts? Are you believers? Depends. Believing in what? I think he's good. I think he's solid. I think he'll continue to be that. More than solid. If you're hoping he's Travis Kelce, I'm not a believer. If you're hoping he's going to be, some top 5 tight end again, definitely. He can definitely do that. Yeah. I'd rather bet on Brock Bowers being something better, if that answers it. I guess I'm not a believer.
This is the year, Pete. They're pulling us back in. He's finally reasonable though to acquire, which
he is. Yeah, like I know. That's why I'm trying not to hate. But, yeah. Thanks so much for your time, gentlemen. No problem, Mr. Scampers.
Appreciate you.
Best tip to writing an article on fantasy football: find a question you want an answer to or wanted an answer to, answer it, and then write that. That's all the articles I've ever written. Because if you would find it useful to know that information, I think the odds are one of us idiots or more would also find it interesting to know. And that's, as far as I can see, the only use for a good fantasy article. Now, I know there's also, here's my top 10 and content stuff, and I don't find any value in reading any of it. Sorry. I know content's content and some of it's just fun, but like I spend too much of my time on this anyway. If someone's like, I found out read Blair Andrews article, where he literally does that at RotoViz, where he found that the receiving efficiency of running backs is somewhat undervalued in the market. And I was like, what the fuck does that mean? And it's really interesting answer to a question. No great edge, but it was true and right and interesting and had something that you could do with it. Value running backs who in the rookie year have pretty good receiving efficiency. And he found a use for an efficiency stat. Look at that. I thought it was great. That's how I'd write an article. Or if you have answers, like you've already answered them, you can write those up, that's all I got. That's how all my articles have come together. I want to know this answer. therefore I assume other people will. I'm going to go find this answer, and then I will tell you the answer so that you don't have to do the legwork. That's the way I think of it. Zach, you're a little more creative than me. You're very.
I don't write, Pete. I don't
writing degree.
I don't write articles anywhere. Like I've never written a fantasy football article in my entire life.
Again, I don't know that's the best advice for like how to get engagement or how to write a popular one, but I think those are the best ones. Not that any of mine were, but that's what I was trying to mirror. Holding Burton over the second. What's a real offer you would accept?
Burton would be a player that I'd pair with something else, like because I think Burton's value has gone up a little bit. He's made a couple of plays in the preseason, so like Burton would be a guy where I'd be like, I'll give you Burton and a second and try to get a first. I think
that's exactly. Yeah, if you're trying to get rid of Burton, you probably need to make an ad to get something interesting. I think that's the right way. Franklin, true. Not AD Mitchell. I'm crying. I need him, but Leggett I don't see. They could definitely be good, but I'm not. I'm kind of on the end. Why no Mitchell? Hasn't Pittman created doubt slightly? No. I do get the Josh Downs potential. Oh, well, that's nice to hear. I think it's just me, James. Me and you think that he could do something that's pretty interesting. I think he had a pretty interesting rookie season. As far as Mitchell, hasn't Pittman created doubts? Maybe I missed some news. No. Again, we go back to talent and situation, and I don't know how talented he is, to be clear, but based on my process where I look at that, I didn't find his whole holistic profile particularly interesting. I thought I got notes. If you ever need to read them. Did I keep them in here? No, I thought I did. Ranks. There we go. What did I say about Mitchell? It's going to be easier. Sorry, this is fascinating streaming, I'm sure. I don't know. We're past the rookie season. I don't have all of this ready to mind anymore. Oh, yeah, I'm really down on him. High A. Low slot, the most common role bucket of this class, and one the NFL likes to take shots at. He works down the field, but not in the slot very much. In other words, played for Texas in the Big 12, opposite Worthy, in his final year after transferring from Georgia from the SEC was his best year. Probably means the NFL will look at him. This was pre-draft. This transfer, plus his inability to gain any traction in Georgia, probably means the pre-draft model is unfairly tanking his overall prospect score because it was very low. But to be clear, even this last year is disappointing. In his cohort, that type of player, high A. Low slot, of this graph, the successful player of the group is DK Metcalf, Terry McLaurin, George Pickens, potentially. As positive potentials. Here's the thing. I don't think he passes that test either. DK Metcalf's best year points per game, and then I compare all three and find him in no way comparable to three best players coming from his type of role in college. I don't think he ever matched or performed or created a role in any way like either any of those three potential positive outcomes. Like that, that's hard to sum up. I don't think he's good, and I don't think that role in particular is good for fantasy when it translates to the NFL, except in a few they really excelled at that role in college.
Yeah, he's a big-bodied receiver who does not win all the time at the catch point, double catches a lot, and also is very inconsistent in his effort in route. And so those kind of three things, he's just not what you're hoping, James. At least in my opinion, he may be, but I don't see it. It doesn't matter. Like all of these other things where you're like, all of these other players are bad. That does not make him good. It's just
again, that's like vacated target level way of thinking, and we just don't believe in that.
And also, like Michael Pittman is there, so like he's already got at least a player who is going to drive far more targets than he is.
And even if he was,
and I don't believe necessarily that Richardson is a great passing quarterback either. So I don't know. It's not my bag, but
there's like a top 25, top 32 season limit. Like if there's no one else, like there's a Preston Williams season you should probably take a look at. That seemed to be a product of there literally being no one else. Yeah. And that's like the upside. Let's see, this is the closest I can come to
Kelvin
an example
Benjamin,
of vacated targets happening.
Devin Funchess.
I actually think he had some talent, but
Funchess.
And the funny thing about I think Funchess has like an average college profile as opposed to a below average one. And he was a tall, big-bodied catcher. That's what he needed, and he barely scraped the top 24. But Preston Williams never comes up for those making vacated targets arguments, which is how you know no one making those arguments actually looks into vacated targets very much. Funchess and Benjamin are a good example too. To be fair, Gavin Baker is horrible.
Javon, I actually like Javon Baker.
That's true. I don't know why I said Gavin. Yeah, you liked him a bit. I remember that. Top 5 tight end for several years. Pittman? Yeah, sure. Just not a top. Kelsey for several years. Jalen McMillan. #good. Deep wide receivers are just never going to excite me at this point. Unless every now and again I still find one. Kyle Pitts looks like he's running in mid. Which works, actually, even if that was meant to be mud. Running in mid works. No, mid works. I'd stick with it. Now that the season's about to start, how are you feeling about Scott Fishbowl teams?
So much better. My Scott Fishbowl, I'm really excited about my Scott Fishbowl team now, especially with the news that everybody is, their face is melting off because Kyron Williams is returning kicks. But I went running back heavy, Pete, in Scott Fishbowl.
That's a good idea this year.
I got Kyron, I've got Bijan, I've got Pacheco, I've got David Montgomery, I've got Chase Brown, Jerome Ford, Devin Singletary, and Jalen Wright, and Rasheen Ali, who may not even make the team, but it was a good parody song. So.
Yeah, I messed up by going the coward's way of 2 quarterbacks. Even if I missed my first pick, I just did it with my next 2. But it's okay. A little disappointed. My wide receiver is a little youngy. I don't like it at all. There's not a single old guy in here. Let's see. Oh, no, wait. I got Diggs. I also got Flowers, Adunze, Worthy. I went rookie, sophomore with the wide receivers because I emphasized tight ends and quarterbacks early. Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence. I also picked up Gardner Minshew by the look of it, and then I got Kittle, Sam Laporta. Like I bully tight end it. I feel okay about it, but I think running back was the way to go. King Downs has been real quiet this month. I wasn't listening last month either, to be fair, so I couldn't tell you. Zach, I referenced your Scott Fishbowl write-ups as part of my scouting. Oh, awesome. That's fantastic.
I appreciate you, Alan.
That stuff, for sure. I'm feeling Brian Thomas Jr. Yeah, we were higher on him than the field throughout the draft process. I kept grabbing, and early second, late first. I was spending those picks if I had one in that range on Mr. Jr. Zach was too, I believe. I remember that. I don't have to ask him. He can just sit there and keep looking pretty. McConkey stinks. Thank you. Richardson equals low receiving yards, push touchdown. Rushing is really the, if we're talking about the same Richardson.
Yeah.
Rushing's really the ceiling. And it'd be quite a ceiling if he hits. Is Justin Herbert a bad season away from being replaced? I don't think so, but it would look a little grim. But he should have a mid-season, is my expectation this year. But no, I know what he has in his range of outcomes. I don't think he should be replaced if he had a bad season. The NFL, not wrong that they are looking to be more and more choppy with their quarterbacks, but I think Herbert's safe. Yeah. I'm going to count a Burton plus a second plus a third for a first. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, do that.
That's the way to go about it, I would say. Too much? I think
mean,
so,
like,
but
just a
that's why I
first?
would take the other side. And if Zach's right that Burton's a little more interesting, preseason, the points are about to get there. This is their chance to get in to see if that's a ticket worth buying. Probably. But you might get a counter. You did throw a third in there too. What the heck is that over there?
That's a good question.
Bookshelf? Yeah, I gotta go. I'm tired. I am hungry. And I got work in like 4 hours.
Pete, look over there.